The sound of chains, the loud crack of a whip, then quiet. Under the hot sun of Texas, a young girl stood without shoes on a wooden stage. Her wrists were tied with old, rusty iron. The crowd looked at her like they were buying animals. The seller smiled. Sweat ran down his neck. Even 4 years after the war ended slavery, secret sales like this still happened in hidden barns. Here, hopeless people were sold to hide from the law. Next one, 17 years old, no husband, no family, been sold 3 times already. Won't talk, won't work, $5 to start. In a time when people wanted strong bodies for farm work, a silent girl like her seemed to have no use. She was too hurt by the war to be worth more than a few coins. No one spoke. A man in the front spit in the dirt, not worth a single penny. The girl's name was Sarah. Her dress was torn and dirty, dust stuck to her skin. Her hair stuck to her face, hiding a bruise on her cheek. She looked at the ground. She did not move. She had stopped crying a long time ago. Crying never changed anything here. Then a voice spoke up. It was calm, deep and steady. "I will pay 20. Heads turned around. At the back of the crowd, a man in an old brown coat stood holding some money. His name was James, 56 years old. He had gray hair on his face. He looked like a man who hadn't smiled in 10 years. The seller blinked. $20? Are you sure? Mr. James nodded once. The hammer hit the table. Sold. Sarah didn't move. She didn't even look at him. James walked closer and took off his hat. When he saw her face clearly, his heart stopped. He saw a scar, a small curved shape on her wrist from 8 years ago. He had wrapped that cut himself. He remembered the little girl hiding behind her father's leg. She had asked if it would leave a mark. He had told her no. He had lied. The seller pushed Sarah forward. James caught her before she fell. Her skin was burning hot. She looked up at him for the first time. Her eyes were green, but empty. He whispered her name. Sarah. Her face didn't change. A light crossed her eyes like a half-hidden memory before the war took everything, but she pushed it down. People like her learned fast not to trust old faces. She didn't remember him, or maybe she did and wished she didn't. Outside, the wind carried the sound of the hammer hitting again. Another life sold, another soul gone. James counted his last coins, gave them to the man, and walked away with the girl who hadn't spoken in years. James didn't speak either. The dirt road went on for miles under a cruel sky. Sarah walked a few steps behind him. Her chains made a soft noise. Every sound reminded him of what he owed. He didn't know if she would ever understand why he did this. Maybe she never would. But as the barn door shut behind them, he felt the past right behind him. 8 years ago, his father's greed had hurt Sarah's family, and now the last part of that family walked beside him, silent, broken, and alive. The sun went lower. Dust rose around their feet. James knew the ghosts of that day would follow him until he told her the truth. But how do you ask for forgiveness from someone who doesn't even know who you are? The road went on for a long time. Right after they left the barn, James stopped the horses. He took a key from his pocket and unlocked her chains. "No one should wear these in a free country," he said quietly, thinking of the promises made after the war. The sun beat down hard, baking the dirt until it cracked. James rode slow. The girl behind him on a smaller horse was silent, with her head down. There was no sound but the noise of the chains still hanging from her wrist. He could feel her fear like heat. Every time he looked back, she stared at the ground, never at him. They stopped near a big tree. Its shade was the only cool spot for miles. James climbed down, tied the horses, and took a water bottle from his bag. He walked over, careful not to get too close. "Here," he said softly. She waited, watching him like he might hit her. Finally, she reached for it, her fingers shaking. She held the bottle tight. Her eyes were narrow, checking him before she let her guard down. She took one sip, wiped her mouth, and then looked straight at him for the first time. Her voice was quiet, but sharp. "Guess you got what you paid for," she said. "Do what you want." James froze.
For a long moment he didn't breathe. The words hurt worse than a bullet. He knelt down slowly so she could see his hands were empty. "I didn't buy you to own you," he said. "I just didn't want to see them sell you again." She let out a bitter laugh, short and dry. "You think that makes it better?" He didn't answer. There was no answer that would sound right. They sat there in the heat, the silence growing between them. James stared at his boots. "I knew your family," he said finally. "Your father was a good man. I should have done more when they came for him." Sarah turned her face away. Her voice was flat. "Everybody says that after it is too late." The wind picked up, shaking the branches above them. She stood up, still holding the water, and started walking back to her horse. James didn't stop her. He just watched, knowing he deserved her anger. James put his hat back on and followed. The sound of horses echoed over the hills, steady and empty. He wondered how long it would take before she stopped seeing him as the enemy. And somewhere in that silence, one thought kept burning. What would she do when she learned the truth? By the time they reached the ranch, the sun was going down behind the hills. The land looked quiet and empty. James untied the horses, gave Sarah a piece of bread, and showed her the small house. "Inside," he said simply. She waited, looking at the single bed and the cold stove. Then she stepped in slowly, careful, like a stray dog testing the floor. For a few days, the ranch stayed silent. Sarah worked without a word. She fed the horses, carried water, and cleaned the floor until her hands hurt. James fixed fences and fixed the roof. He tried not to watch her too closely. They lived like two ghosts in the same place, but out here, silence never lasted long. On the third day, 3 riders came up the road. James saw the dust first, then the shine of a badge. It was Sheriff Vance, the man who once said he protected the law. The same man who led soldiers to burn Sarah's farm to ash. Vance got off his horse, smiling. "Well, look who it is, James." His eyes moved past James and landed on the girl standing behind the fence. He looked at the scar on her wrist, the one from that bad night 8 years back. His smile went away for a second. Old secrets didn't stay hidden easily here. "Now that is a face I thought I would never see again." Sarah froze. Her hands held the wooden fence tight. James stepped between them. "You have had your look," he said quietly. Vance laughed. "You buying lost girls now, James? Is she here to keep you warm at night?" James didn't move, but the air changed. It was the kind of silence that comes right before a gunshot. "I paid for her freedom," James said, his voice low and steady, "not her body." Vance took a slow step forward. His hand rested on his gun. "Well, that is very nice of you, but I remember that name. Her daddy was an enemy." He used the same old lie to explain the attack, calling honest farmers enemies just to take their land. Sarah's breath stopped. She held the fence harder. Her mind flashed back to the fire that night. She wanted to yell the truth at him, but she knew silence had kept her alive this long. James's jaw got tight. "She is under my protection," he said. Vance laughed softly. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a single bullet. He put it on the fence post between them. "A reminder, James," he said softly. "Some ghosts don't stay buried." When they finally rode away, the dust they left behind felt heavy. Sarah picked up the bullet and turned it in her hand. "Who was that?" she asked quietly. James didn't answer. Not yet. He just looked out toward the sun. The memory of fire and screams still burned in his mind, because he knew this wasn't over, and when Vance came back, there would be blood. If you stayed with me this far, pour yourself a cup of tea, sit back and relax with the story. Tell me what time it is where you are. Where are you listening from? And if you want to know what happens when the truth finally comes out, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next part. That night, the wind blew harder than usual. It carried the smell of rain. James sat by the small fire in the house. Sarah sat across from him, silent as ever. Neither had spoken since Vance visited, but silence has a way of forcing the truth out. After a while, Sarah reached into her pocket and put something on the table. A small silver watch, old and worn. The letter T was carved on the back. She pushed it toward him. "Do you know this?" she asked quietly. James's hand froze. He did know it. Thomas, her father.
"I found it in a bag left behind after the attack," she said. "I kept it for 8 years. Every time they sold me to a new house, I made sure no one ever touched it. It was the last thing he gave me before the soldiers came." She whispered, "Keep this safe, Sarah." A reminder of the family the war destroyed. She looked up at him. Her eyes were sharp but wet with tears. "You knew him, didn't you?" James swallowed hard. His voice sounded rough. "I did." Sarah leaned forward. "Then tell me the truth. What really happened that night?" James stared at the fire for a long time. The flames moved and twisted, like ghosts dancing. He finally spoke. Each word was slow and heavy. "My father sold out your family for their land after the war. I heard him telling the soldiers. I rode to warn your dad, but it was too late. Everything was burning. I was scared. I lived and they didn't." Sarah said nothing. She reached for the watch and held it tight. Her hand shook like she wanted to throw it into the fire and forget, but the memories held on tight. "You think telling me this makes it better?" she asked. "No," he said softly, "it doesn't, but you deserve to know who was standing next to you." For a long time they just sat there. The fire made noise between them. Outside, thunder rolled over the hills. Sarah finally spoke again, her voice almost a whisper. "If your father did all that, why are you the one feeling guilty?" James looked up. His eyes were tired but steady. "Because I was there, because I did nothing, and because I am still breathing when they are not." The fire popped once more. Sarah looked at him, and for the first time since they met, her anger seemed to break a little. Not gone, just cracked, like something inside her was trying to understand. But before she could speak again, a sound broke through the storm outside. The sound of horses running, fast and close. James reached for his gun, because sometimes the past comes back. The sound of horses faded away, leaving only the sound of the dying fire. James stood by the door, gun in hand, looking at the rain. Sarah sat near the fire, holding the silver watch tight. Neither spoke, but the silence was different now. Not cold, not angry, just heavy with truth. When morning came, the storm was gone. The sky was clean. Soft light fell over the ranch. James went out to fix the broken fence. His back hurt from years of work and regret. He didn't hear Sarah at first, not until she spoke behind him. "You were doing it wrong." Her voice was dry, almost joking. He turned. She was holding the hammer. Her hair was messy, and her dress was still wet from the rain. Without another word, she came over and started helping him. They worked side by side for hours. No talking, just the sound of wood and wind. And somehow, in that quiet work, something began to change. Not love, not yet, but something that felt like peace. After that night, James started carving simple wooden boards. He thought Sarah deserved a place to honor her family. Later that evening, James built 2 small wooden crosses near the fence. He carved the names by hand, one for Thomas and one simply marked family. When Sarah saw it, her eyes filled with tears she had held for 8 long years. She knelt beside the graves, touching the letters with her fingers. Then she stood, walked up to him, and put the watch back into his hand. "I think it is time you keep it," she said softly. He shook his head. "No, it belongs to them." She smiled, small and tired but real. "Then let it stay here." That night she didn't sleep in the corner by the door. She sat by the window instead, watching the stars. And James, sitting across the room, finally felt like he could breathe again. Days turned into weeks. Sarah stayed. She fixed clothes, planted seeds, and helped him when he slipped in the mud one day. Small acts building trust. Little by little, the ghosts that haunted the ranch began to fade. Maybe forgiveness doesn't come in one moment. Maybe it grows the way grass grows through burned soil, quiet and slow. And maybe that is what healing really is. If you have ever carried a guilt too heavy to name, what would it take for you to forgive yourself? And if someone hurt you, could you ever let them try to make it right? Take a deep breath, pour yourself a cup of tea, and think about that. If this story touched something in you, tap the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Because sometimes, even in the wildest places, people still find their way home.